Hey guys, Damien here. As I continue to interview the top MSPs in the world, one thing has become incredibly clear. It's time that we let go. Even more than that, every time I focus on my zone of genius and get out of the way and do the very few things I'm good at and delegate to others, I'm ready for that next level of growth. One way that I could help you is with Servosity. We co-manage your backups and disaster recovery so you can focus on what you do best, let us do the rest. And then what we do is we test the backups every single day so you never have to worry. If you'd like to engage us or just learn more, click the link below.
Don't tell them you know what's wrong if you don't know what's wrong. And you get more respect from a customer when you tell them, you know what, I have no idea what this is right now. I need to do some research. I'll get back to you. You know, we'll put our best team on this. But whether they're computer savvy or not, people have the ability to pick up whether or not you're telling them the truth or not.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset. Today I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet. Today I got the opportunity to interview Chris Friel of VoDaVi Technologies. And one thing comes to mind: overcoming fear, overcoming adversity. From his blue-collar upbringing to his high school dropout to his boss telling him he wasn't enough, time and time again, he faced personal and business challenges and was told by bosses, by peers, even quote-unquote friends, you can't do it, you won't succeed, and it won't work. So if you've struggled and thought, I can't do it, I'm not ready yet, I'm not enough, because I know I have, then don't miss out on our conversation with Chris Friel. Well, let's jump right in, Chris. So tell me about your origin story, right? A lot of MSPs want to be where you are, but I found not everybody wants to go through what maybe you had to go through to get there.
Grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, farm country. We grew up with snowmobiles, dirt bikes, three-wheelers. That's kind of how we got ourselves in trouble growing up. Started working at a young age, 13 years old. Neighbor was a general manager at a car dealership, so we cleaned cars and saved money. Bought my first car, I think, when I was 14, getting it ready for when I turned 16.
Oh, wow.
My father was a union lineman his whole career. My brother followed in his footsteps. I was going to do the same. Right around 18, 19 years old, my brother and my father had this suspicion that I was afraid of heights, and proved it to me by asking me to climb the pole at the corner of our property with a climbing belt and hooks, and it didn't go over well. So I had to change my trajectory in life. So I became a mechanic. I was always very good, mechanically. I rebuilt one of my snowmobiles. I was like 10 years old. And
oh, wow.
So self-taught in that, and just kind of thought that I was going to do that as a career move. And got into scuba diving when I was 18 years old. And scuba diving is very mathematical with regards to how long you can stay on the bottom and how long it takes you to come to the surface. That's just the basics of it. And it gets more complex, very complex. And early 90s, one of the guys that we're friends with wrote a computer program. It ran on DOS. I didn't know anything about computers, but I wanted to use the program. So same kind of thing. I kind of taught myself how to run the program. And that's what really kind of got me into computers. I moved up to Massachusetts from Pennsylvania to do a lot of look for some shipwrecks up here. The people weren't really shipwreck diving up here, so I came up here to look for shipwrecks, and ended up just taking jobs where I could take jobs, and I ended up falling into a job working for a travel company doing statistics, which was kind of odd because I quit high school. Really, the reason why I quit school was I wasn't going to graduate, and the main reason was because my math grades were so bad. And I was
really
kind of told that I was horrible at math, and here I am today. So that's kind of where it all started. When I was doing the statistics for the company, they were off the phone system. So this was an Avaya or a Lucent legacy phone system at the time. So I kind of learned the ropes on that system. And then, as we all know, things progressed into voice over IP and, to where we are today. So that's kind of where my background, that's where everything, how it all started, where it all went, everything's self-taught. And like I said, never really had any kind of formal training in really anything that I've done in my life when it comes to a career.
So I think this is interesting because I know I've looked back and realized I thought I wasn't good at this. And then later I was actually pretty good at it. And, I guess according to high school, math was not your thing, but I don't know if it's scuba, but I mean, how you end up in statistics. I assume, math is, I don't know if it's your passion, but it sounds like you must be pretty good at it. How did you end up in statistics if you're not doing math?
I'm not Sheldon Cooper, I guess, by any means. I'm never going to say that, but I mean, when we're in the office and we're going over stuff, a lot of times I could do the stuff in my head where other people have calculators out, and that kind of dawned on me. Actually, when I worked for the travel company, the president of the company said to me at one point, we're in a meeting with 10 or 15 other people, and everyone had calculators out, and she had said to me, "Why do you use your calculator? You already know the answer in your head." And she was kind of the one that really nurtured me along to get me away from that embarrassment, I guess you could say, or trying to hide the fact that I wasn't good at math, or the people think if you count on your fingers, it means that you're bad at math. And I always try to tell people, whatever you need to do to make sure the answer's correct. If you have to use your fingers, use your fingers. If you have to count ceiling tiles, count ceiling tiles. But, the key is to get the right answer, not to, make yourself look like you're smarter than you are or better than you are at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that was kind of me moving into a different mode in my brain when it comes to, before I was not embarrassed, but I didn't share with people that I quit school, because everybody you meet, I felt like everybody I met, especially as I got older, you shake their hand and the very first question they ask you is, where'd you go to school? And, I didn't. And there's still people out there today that I run into that are taken back by that, and they feel, and they're, at some level, they don't like that. They feel like that I haven't paid my dues, or, that, and I kind of look at it and say, well, you have all the student loans and, you got to worry about all that stuff. I don't have to worry about that stuff. But I do say at the end of the day, the amount of work that I put into my craft, so to speak, I feel like I put in my time and put in my dues. So from there, I left the company when the Democratic National Convention came into town in 2004. I resigned.
This is the statistics company?
Yeah, the travel company, correct. Okay. Yeah. And took some time off just to clear my head a little bit. And I got called from a company, MSP Technologies, and they brought me on. They wanted me to come on board because of my knowledge of voice over IP. So I took the position with them, was with them for up until 2009. And they were selling off the company. They were breaking it up and selling it off. So that's when I went out and I started my own business. And that's how VoDaVi came about in 2009. So I started September 30th, 2009 was day one of the new era.
Yeah. So I want to get into that. But before we do, I'm curious because I'm a high school dropout too. I understand that. And I'm curious how you went from perhaps not wanting to share the part that some people didn't look favorably on about being in my case, high school dropout, in your case, maybe not going to college, to I have the confidence to go start my own company? Like, what changed along the way, or was that all always there?
It's a great question, and I guess it's the only answer that I ever give everybody is really the same answer. Was always the people that would tell me I can't do something. When I decided to go out on my own, my boss at the time, who I had a lot of respect for, he just turned on me immediately and he says, you have no college degree, you have no background, there's no way you're going to be able to make it. What are you doing? So that was a big major factor for me. And that's kind of how it was throughout my life. I mean, certain things, whether or not my neighbor said he could beat me on the snowmobile. Well, you're not going to be able to beat me. I'm faster than you are, So I just always had that, I think, competitive nature in me. But besides that, when I was making the decision, it wasn't an overnight decision. It took me a few months, but it was always in the back of my mind. And what I said to myself over and over again was, I'd rather be 85 years old and say I tried to start my own business. I did, I really gave it my all, but it just didn't work out, or I made some mistakes here, and they were mistakes that I shouldn't have made, but I tried anyway. I'd rather do that than not try and wonder for the rest of my life what would have happened. And that's really what the deciding factor was.
I love the long-term vision there. What would your future self think of that? Is a great way to frame it.
I think my future self would have been pretty upset if I didn't try. Especially, it's easy to say that now, right? I mean, I'm doing well. I'm successful, so it's easy to say that. And to be perfectly honest, I haven't really had to struggle. It's gone fairly smoothly for me since day one, but I've had people help me out along the way. I've had my old boss, the president of my old company, who turfed business back to me. He didn't need to do that. If he didn't do that, I would have had a hard time getting off the ground. So I had the help, but again, I do see other people starting their own businesses and see the struggles that they're going through. They say the first 3 to 5 years you don't make any money. Well, that may be true. It wasn't true for me. I don't think I would have made it 3 or 5 years without making any money. So that those are really the big factors that got me moving.
Now, how is that different for you? What do you mean by that? Because I'm curious what making money even means, depending on who you're talking to.
Being able to support myself, pay my bills, making sure that I make payroll, making sure all the bills are paid. Really, that to me, in the beginning, was that was obviously the clear thing that I needed to do, is to make sure that I paid all my bills and took care of. I was a one-man band for the first 3 years. And then I always say the day you bring on an employee, the stress level changes. Because now you have to make sure that not only are you responsible for them, they probably have a family, so you're responsible for the family and all that. So that was a big eye-opener for me. But yeah, that's that's all I got for that.
Was hiring your first employee more of a mindset shift that you finally realized that was time? Or is it just that just had to get to a certain revenue or profit?
It was the first managed services customer that I brought on. I was doing professional services work. I was doing a lot of network engineering, voice over IP engineering and stuff like that, stuff that fell in my wheelhouse. I can build a computer, but I'm not as good as a lot of guys are at it. If you ask me to spec out a laptop, I don't really know the difference between an i3, an i9, and i5. That's not my wheelhouse. I have guys that know that stuff. But it was my first managed services customer, so it was help desk support. So I brought in a fairly young kid, to handle it. He was on site, and did a great job. But again, comes with its challenges, of course, doing it as well. Having him off-site, not in an office, working at a customer like that. And it's interesting when I look at the people that we've hired over the years for help desk. We've actually had better success bringing people in that have no experience in a corporate environment than people that have experience working help desk in a corporate environment. And we always kind of say, people ask, well, what's the reason behind that? What do I think the reason is? And I think a lot of the people that come in from the corporate environment have bad habits. And we bring in, this kid that I brought in, he didn't even know what a domain controller was. He didn't even know the difference between logging into a domain and not logging into a domain. But, we nurtured him along, and that's kind of how the managed services business started.
You had an interesting background, right? Coming from a very hands-on, blue-collar, not college graduate. Also, I think to me, interesting where you had a lot of VoIP. You had a lot of other things, not to maybe what we might think of nowadays as traditional, building computers and, putting in cards and racking servers and all that kind of stuff. And we were talking before this about customer service, and I want to talk in just a minute about what that means to you and why. But I wanted to ask a question before that, which is, why is it so important to you to deliver the way you do on customer service?
Wow, that's a good question. I know we had touched on this a little bit. I mean, from a business perspective, it's important because we do the same thing as tens of thousands of other companies out there. We sell the same product. We offer cloud services. We, security, all that stuff. We get the same discounts, more or less. People don't really realize that. They think like the big companies get bigger discounts than smaller companies like ours, and they don't. They can absorb them a little bit differently. So it's really the only thing that I can think of or that I can come up with consistently that can set us apart from the competition, and by doing that, we get recognized by our clients all the time. I mean, they say, I have to keep telling my guys, you don't let them call your direct line. You can't let them call your direct line. They got to call into the help desk. It's the plight of every MSP out there, right? We all deal with the same thing because they do such a good job. And it's, for me to sit here and say we have 100% customer satisfaction, I think everybody that would listen to this would say, we've heard that before, but, we're pretty close. And we achieve that by making sure not only do we fix the problem, but we fix it right, and we check back in, make sure the problem doesn't come back, and we check in with the customer and to ensure that issue that they were having a problem with goes away. And I think one of the things that I see a lot of times, or I hear a lot from other companies out there, is that the clients just feel, they call in, they want to get the person off the phone, they don't feel like they care, they don't feel like, a lot of times they try to minimize the person's issue. And that's one thing I try to drive down to everybody is, if Sally calls up and she's freaking out because she can't print, it's not your job to tell her not to freak out. It's your job to tell her, hey, we'll fix the problem. But, you don't really understand, you have to understand why she's having a problem. Maybe she's trying to print something for a board meeting, and everybody's in that meeting waiting and she can't print. So, fix the problem. just, keep it low key. Don't get her excited or don't get him or her excited about it. And that goes a long way. And it's a question that we ask during an interview all the time. If Sally can't print and she needs to print for a board meeting and the meeting is in 10 minutes, what do you do? And, as you can imagine, we get answers across the board. But really the answer is, can you print to another printer? Can somebody else print it for you temporarily? And then we can circle back and take a look at it. It's not, and the reason why we present that question, it's not a technical answer. Mm-hmm. We're looking for a customer service answer. We're looking for, do you have the critical thinking? I think I said this when we had talked before. I have a sign up in the office that says critical thinking. Think through the process. And that. So that's I think one of the things that we really focus on.
So I know customer service is big, important. Are there anything else that's made it to the interview process that helps you understand?
Yeah,
there's a lot of technical people.
Yeah, we do check-in calls, and what that is we have probably, I probably should know the number, but I don't. We probably have about 10 to 20 customers that sometimes we hear from them 2 or 3 times in a month, and sometimes we'll go 3 or 4 months and we don't hear from them. So we don't want to go that long. So what we do is, if you're a customer ABC, we'll go through our call list. So once a month we have a call list, and we look at that call list and say, okay, ABC company, and we look at the tickets in the ticketing system. Haven't heard from anybody in a month. Let's pick up the phone and call them. And one of our customers we've had for a long time, it's 4 people. It's a family business, and very small customer, but again, been with us for a long time. We did a check-in call with them one time, and they said that we couldn't get through to them by calling them. So we sent them an email, and they got back to us. They called us back on a cell phone and said, we think our phone system's broken, and we're responsible for the phone system. And we said, what do you mean? And then we realized we tried to call them and we couldn't get through. They said, can you make outbound calls? No. All right, well, we need to take a look at that. And their answer was, well, it's been really, really quiet. We're not sure whether we want you to fix this or not. So really, that's the reason why we're doing the check-in calls, to see if there's anything that, and believe it or not, we do get a lot of customers or clients that we make that call to them and say, you know what, I heard that Sally's having a hard time with email. Let me get a hold of her, have her give you a call back. Thanks for checking in. So we do get that customer that says, yeah, I was going to call you, but I didn't want to. If I had $1 for every time I had a customer say, I was going to call you guys, but I didn't want to bother you guys. I know you're so busy. And they're paying us, they're paying us for support. So, that's definitely one thing I know that sets us apart. I've yet to meet a peer out there that does check-in calls, and I'm pretty sure that when they walk away from the conversation, they probably say to themselves, this guy's crazy. Why is he doing it that way?
Yeah. What else have you learned that matters from a customer service perspective?
Don't lie to them.
That's a good one.
Don't lie to them. Don't tell them you know what's wrong if you don't know what's wrong. And you get more respect from a customer when you tell them, you know what, I have no idea what this is right now. I need to do some research. I'll get back to you. We'll put our, best team on this. But when you sit there and fumble around, especially when you're taking remote control of somebody's computer, they're watching you move the mouse around. You need to be sure you knew what you're doing. You can't be fumbling around. And I think that to me is whether they're computer savvy or not, people have the ability to pick up whether or not you're telling them the truth or not. We're working on a project. It's a business. They're a neighbor to us. They came over and they want us to help them migrate a SQL server. And I just said to them, listen, we don't do SQL. We can do it. We know how to do it. We'll subcontract it out. I know who to call. A guy I used to work with, he's an expert on this stuff. But it's not something that I'm going to lie to you and tell you that we're going to take on in-house. If you want to do that, then, or I can just put you in touch with this guy and you can go from there. And they said, no, we'll go through you and let us manage the process and all that.
That's a lot more transparency than I think most people would expect, because especially the offer to introduce them. Because you could say, well, even though we're not experts, I can find somebody. I think a lot of people would stop there. Or unfortunately, I think when I was in my earlier MSP days, I would say, yeah, I'll figure it out. Give me a week, give me 2 weeks. I'll get on the internet. I'll Google, I'll read through that.
We do that. We do.
Right?
I mean, we're engineers, so at the end of the day, we still want to figure out what it is. Like one thing I try to explain to the technical staff and even the administrative staff too, everybody as a whole, and I try to do this. Sometimes a problem comes in that you have to address right away, and it's important and you have to fix the problem, right? But there's an underlying issue. So we always want to go back and see if we can uncover what that underlying issue is. Like I always say, nothing's ever temporary. Don't label something temporary. Don't say it's old. This is the old server. Don't name it old server, because it's never going to get renamed. Any of that stuff. My number one thing I will never get involved in is Oracle. So anyone that's known me for a long time has heard me say that a million times. We'll get our hands into stuff, like you said, maybe behind the scenes, we'll try to figure it out too, or what's going on. But Oracle, I don't want to get involved. But I also have a staff that they're like me as well. I know that we'll have the conversation that we're not getting involved in the SQL server, and then they go back into their offices and they're on the keyboard trying to figure out how to migrate SQL servers, because they'll come back to me and say, "Oh, we could do this. Why are we going to sub this out? Let's just sub it out, guys. Just yeah, But because our expertise is voice over IP, legacy voice, or converting legacy voice to voice over IP, networking, and then support, managed services support. I mean, we do server work. We build servers. You kind of have to, especially in the voice world, when we're building virtual servers for voice and all that. So,
how long did it take you to realize that you need to say no, and you need to say, well, this is what we're good at, this is what we're not? Especially when we're all tech guys that want to say we can all figure it out.
It's a great question. I know early on I didn't say no. I took everything that came at me. We analyze more now. We analyze the data that when we're looking at the profitability of a project or profitability of a customer as a whole, our analysis of that is a lot deeper than it used to be. And before it was, hey, this is a $100,000 project. Even though it took us 200 hours, we still had a $100,000 project, but we never really broke it down. How much money did we really make on this project? Well, we went over by 60 hours. We didn't, why did we not do well? We do postmortems on projects. Once we're done the postmortem, the tech team gets together, we go through the postmortem, we discuss it, and, look at what we did right, what did we do wrong, what can we make better the next time around? And it's always about kind of refining and retooling. Like I've heard people refer to us as like a boutique shop, right? How we adjust ourselves, and we can adjust very quickly, right? The big companies out there can't do what we can do. We can make those adjustments. Same type of project comes in that we lost, we didn't do well on. Well, we go back to the postmortem. We look at the postmortem. Oh, that's right. This is where we got killed on that project. This is where we're not going to make the mistake on this project.
You do something that it seems like everybody's teaching us to not do. You were saying you have a different contract for each customer.
We do.
Help me understand that.
I've heard from a lot of clients out there that they don't like the bronze, silver, gold, platinum. There's certain things that they want, but then they have to choose this. And so I've heard that side of it. We do it because every customer is different. Is it difficult to manage? It has its challenges. Is it as bad as you would think? It's really not. It's really not. We have a database that all the techs, they have our ticketing system, up on one screen and the database up on another screen. And it's what we call our customer entitlement database. As soon as that call comes in from that customer, first of all, they know the customers pretty well. But if it's somebody new coming in, they're going to go to that customer entitlement database. And the customer's calling in, again, we're going to say Sally's calling in with a printing issue. They're going to pull up that customer and they're going to see that we don't support the printers. So it's not that they're pulling a contract out of a file and running through the contract and saying, we support X, Y, and Z, but we don't support this. So there's a little bit of extra work involved in getting that into that database. But at the end of the day, it works. It works for us to have it that way. If we have 10,000 customers, are we going to be able to do that? Probably not. Am I going to still try to do it? I know there's big companies out there. I guarantee you that all the big ones out there, they have at least a handful of customers that have their own contracts that are custom written because they're such big customers that they're going to write that contract to meet that customer's needs. We support Lynn Public Schools is a big account of ours, one of our flagship accounts. I always say this, if they want us to come up and sweep the floor for them, then we'll put it in the contract, right? Because they're that big of a customer, they're that important to us. That we'll do that, and if they want us to put it in there, that once a week we'll come up and tidy stuff up, and honestly, what we do is once a month we go into their systems and we go through and we clean up in their phone system stuff that we find that was kind of left over from when they removed a user or a phone out of the system, but they didn't completely do it. So we'll go in and we'll clean that up. That's not part of the contract, but we just do that. And to be honest with you, us doing that, it helps us too, because we support their phone system. So if we keep it tidy, it helps us as well.
So how do you guys find the bandwidth from a time perspective to go behind them on their phone system and make monthly check-in calls? Because so many MSPs I talk to, their team's already working, overtime or around the clock or what have you. So it's kind of interesting to me that you can be proactive and help clean up and do stuff outside the contract, which I think is probably your secret to success, that amazing customer service. But now I'm wondering how you pull that off.
Wow, this is going to come out this is going to be a cocky comment, but I just think we do it better than everybody else. I think we're more efficient than most companies out there. But if I have to put my finger on one thing, that one thing would be when I said earlier that not only do we go in and we fix the problem, we identify what the cause of the problem was, and we fix that underlying issue to ensure that problem doesn't come back again. We rarely, I'm saying I don't know the numbers. I could get them, I'm sure, but repeat calls for the same issue, maybe 2 a month at best, and my guys might argue that one. And again, it depends on the timing, right? I mean, if that issue's got to be fixed right at that moment, we'll just fix the issue, but we'll circle back and look to see what the underlying issue can be just getting that person on the phone. I use the example of attaching something in an email. And an example I use is, let's say it's, almost everybody's using Exchange Online or Google, right? So there's an attachment limitation size. So Sally's trying to attach an email or an attachment in an email that's 60 meg in size. It's not going to go through. It's just not, no matter what she does, it's not going to go through. At that moment, she's freaking out. She's trying to get it sent, and it's not going through. So we're going to grab it. We're going to break it up into chunks, and you're going to have to send separate emails. And then we can come behind the scenes and say, okay, listen, if your business is about sending these large files all the time, then we're going to have to make a change in the back end. And we're going to open that restriction up. And so we'll go, and that solves that problem. But sometimes the answer, like help desk, right? The name of it right there tells you. It's not always just about a technical answer. So the follow-up to that problem that came in might just be a training issue, getting that person back on the phone and saying, okay, Sally, next time you run into this issue, just take these files individually, break them up. Unfortunately, you're going to have to send multiple emails to get to send it, get them across to whoever you need to get them to. But this is the way around it. Or we can do this step and open up, the limitations on it. So that's kind of how we do that.
Yeah. I love the fact that you don't just say no or wait a month or whatever till we can change your plan or something like that.
And I'll tell you, it's interesting that you asked that question about how do we do it. I think it was 2 Mondays ago, I went into the office and I wasn't in on Friday. And Ashley, who's my VP of operations, we were in my office just talking about the weekend and stuff like that. And she's like, hey, I just want to let you know everybody left around noontime on Friday. She said it was so dead in here. It was dead quiet. Phones weren't ringing. And I was thrilled. I'm thrilled to hear that. I just think that we're more efficient at it. I look at peers out there. Their desks are filled with paper and they got junk everywhere and they're disorganized and they're not addressing, what are you really trying to do here? That person just called back 3 times for the same issue. 3 times. Just, what's causing the problem? We had a big, we put in a big core network switch at a customer and the switch went down. About 24 hours after we put it in, we were live. We had gone live on it. Of course, I'm losing my mind. It's 10 o'clock at night. It was first school, so it was really a big deal. And they're about 80 miles away. So I called one of my guys up and said, I'll meet you at the office. We'll jump in my truck and we'll head up there, figure out what's going on. In the meantime, I called the customer and I said, is there any chance there's a power outage? Because I'm just praying that there's a power outage.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I don't think there is. And he's like, well, let me get over there. He's closer than we were. Let me get over there first before you start driving up. What they ended up doing was the switch had 4 power supplies in it. They had 2 power supplies plugged into one outlet. I think we talked about this a little bit before. And they had 2 power supplies plugged in to another outlet, but they were on the same circuit.
Yeah.
So they brought it, kept tripping the breaker. So So just do me a favor, go find another outlet somewhere in another room, throw an extension cord, I don't know, cut a hole in the wall. I'll pay for the hole. Just cut a hole in the wall, find something, and they plugged it in, everything. And they have an electrician coming in to rewire and get everything set up the right way for them. But that was a little bit of a stressful day. But, again, find the underlying, cause or issue and fix the problem. Don't, just fix it and let's make sure it doesn't happen again.
So when we were talking before, we kind of, I think, shared being misunderstood, not only as a business owner, but as an individual. And I think that can come from I know that I didn't go to high school or I didn't do this. So there's that aspect, but also it's just, I'm not good at this, but I can visualize this entire thing. And I think you were saying, like, I can visualize the entire network and design it in my head. And so, and have kind of these, what I would call superpowers. So I'm curious, do you reflect back and say these superpowers help me succeed? And then these, they made it hard for me because, I was labeled as different or misunderstood. Just kind of curious what your journey has been.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely the person who can visualize stuff. When I'm laying in bed and, we have a network or something like that ahead of us that we're trying to plan out for a customer. I got it. I have it in my head for sure. And then I'm a big whiteboard guy. So I'm always got the whiteboard. I think last time we spoke, I was in my office. You could see it behind me.
Yeah.
And, is that kind of the question that you're asking, or?
Yeah. And I'm curious, to me, I call that being unconventional, which I think gives you powers, but creates challenges. And I'm curious, when did you first notice, like, I can visualize a whole ton of things that people can't, or?
Yeah, I almost go back to rebuilding my snowmobile when I was younger, right? I mean, 10 years old, I blew it up. My dad's like, I'm not buying you another one, so I don't know what the hell to tell you. Just figure it out. And to me, I looked at it as long as everything goes back in the way it came out, I can't really go wrong. Mm-hmm. I know that the piston, I blew one of the pistons. I could see it was all melted. So I knew I had to get a new piston, but, I kind of took that approach is, take it apart, put it back together. One of the things I kind of preach to people, I think about if my staff was listening to me right now, they'd be rolling their eyes, but I'm a person that I feel like I can troubleshoot anything if you give me time. And I use the example of, like, I don't work on Xerox copiers, but I know that if you give me enough time, I can figure out why it's not working. The Xerox guy could probably come in and in 5 minutes be like, boom, 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 or, pull this wire, change this, and you're all set. So I've always kind of had that approach of, and then to amp it up a notch, when I do have that voice behind me saying, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, that's just okay, seriously, well, you can, but I can't. And that's kind of the approach that I take. And that's kind of how I've been my whole life, with the exception of being a lineman. There's no way you're getting me up along. No way.
Yeah.
And we have a cabling division, and we need those man lifts, the scissors lifts a lot to get up, especially for outdoor access points and stuff. And my key guy, Brian, he's not good with heights either. He's only a little bit better than I am. And, yeah, so, but there's another good example right there too, is our cabling division. We spun that up 2 years ago. Me coming from the wiring background or being from the electrical background, we spun up that division, and we knew we had to get into fiber optic and learn fiber optics. So we bought a bunch of fiber, we bought a bunch of connectors, we bought all the tools, and we learned how to splice fiber. And we do very well. I mean, that division of the company, and we spun it up in February of 2022, and we did about $500,000 in profit for that year just on that division of the cable and
Wow.
yeah. So we're pretty happy about that.
I think cabling is another example of where traditional MSP playbooks say, focus on your one thing. Don't get into cabling. Don't get into VoIP. Don't get into too many areas. So I find that really interesting. How do you overcome? How have you overcome being told you can't or you won't succeed? I know it's your employer before you left, and I don't know if it's happened since then, but right throughout life, right, you've had this, people look down at you for having not having the high school degree, or, your interesting story of the employer before saying you won't make it, you won't succeed. So, how's that affected you, and what tools have you used kind of mentally to overcome that fear of I won't succeed?
It's really, I'm kind of over it at this point, really. I mean, it gave me drive. It really just gave me the drive to get to where I'm at. But it's interesting that you bring up that other MSPs say you got to stick, with one thing. And there's a lot of MSPs that say you got to stick with one vertical, right? If you do accounting, you do accounting. And that may be true. That may be the case. And that may work for them. I feel like when we did the cabling side, we were subcontracting a lot of it out. And we just not only, of course, from a business perspective, I'm looking to get revenue in. But what was also messing us up too was we were waiting for cabling companies to get work done so we could get our work done and all the schedule stuff. And that was really becoming a problem. But I've heard that a lot from other, peers out there saying, you need to focus more on cloud. And I just don't agree with it. I just don't agree with the approach. I go back to having conversations 10 years ago and everyone talking about going to the cloud and everything's going to go to the cloud. And I disagreed and said, I agree that things are going to go to the cloud. And they did, but the pendulum swung back in the middle. Everything was on-prem for forever, right? And then everything went to the cloud. And now it's kind of coming back in the middle. I mean, there's a lot of companies where they have a server, they have servers in-house and they push stuff out to the cloud. So I think overcoming that stuff was also realizing that the people out there that did have the degrees and that did put me down weren't doing so well for themselves. And as much as, you shouldn't smile about it, it's kind of hard not to, especially the ones that were really hard on me. I had lost friends over it. There was a couple guys that went out on their own when I did, and we were going to partner up together, and that kind of fell apart because they didn't think that I was capable of what they were capable of, and they're no longer in existence anymore. So it's also not giving up. There's definitely been times. I don't know if you'll use this or not, but I just got divorced, so I just went through a 3-year, almost 4 years. Just went through it. A lot of money involved, and I had to focus on that too. So it took my focus away from the business a lot. But it there was times when I wanted to give up for sure, because I was just, I can't deal with this, guys. I can't deal with this over here. And, but it keeps you going too, because, I've put so much into it and I have people relying on me. I told them when everything started, I said, listen, you got to trust me. We're going to get through this. It's not going to be easy, but we'll get there, and don't get discouraged. I don't get discouraged easy.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that you would be not only open, but have the foresight to say that, we'll get through this, because I think it'd be easy to say, that's my battle or my journey, or not even have the self-awareness to realize how much that's going to impact you and the company. So to say, hey, we're going to get through this.
Yeah.
I think it's not only a good attitude, it's really good communication, and more importantly, I would say walking the walk, not just saying that we should be open.
Well, the girls that worked for me took it personal. So they were very, and really almost all my staff did. They took it very personal, and and they were they had my back for sure through everything going on, and so I think when you get through something like that, also it makes you realize that some of the other challenges that come along aren't that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
They're just temporary. I mean, we all want to do this, right? I never met a person who has ever said, I don't want to go back and change things, right? When I think about September 30th, 2009, the day I started the business, my God, if I knew then what I know now, there'd be a lot of things that are different for sure. But I don't know where I would be. I am where I am, and I am who I am because of the stuff the challenges that I had to deal with.
In all the years you've been in business, what's the biggest lesson you've learned, Chris?
Go with your instinct. Definitely go with your instinct. If you're a person that has gone on your gut in your life, and you know what that means, and you understand that, because some people don't get that, right? Some people don't have that gut instinct. But if you truly have that gut instinct, and then go with your gut instinct. I mean, my staff say it all the time, and I've said it for all the years that we've been together. You were right again, man. Your gut was right. Your gut was right. And I think it goes back to that gut feeling of trying to start the business. If it doesn't work out, I know I can go get a job working for another company. I'm not worried about whether I'm not going to be able to get a decent salary working somewhere else. But I'm glad I made I had my parents even saying to me, what are you doing? Like, do you know how to start your own business? I'm like, I don't know. I got to go down to the courthouse, raise my hand, take an oath. It became a DBA business at that point. I wasn't incorporated or anything. I just, that's how it started. I mean, and then I bought some books and I read some books and just go from there. So that to me, I think would be, because you don't want to regret it. Mm-hmm. We all have regrets, and some of those big regrets got to be, because if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be talking to you. And I'd be sitting here on October 15th saying to myself, I wonder what would happen if I tried to start my own business. It's a little too late. I'm going to be 55 years old. I started when I was 39. So.
Well, one thing that's so cool about that is I think there's a misperception that you can only start a business when you're really young, maybe in your 20s before you have any, kids or wife or mortgage or, a lot of the things that come with being a little older in life.
Right.
So I think I love that because there's a lot of people that might be listening and they go, I can't do this in my late 30s or early 40s.
Yeah, well, and I look back now and I'm like, I was young. I was young, So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about your mindset, your perspective.
yeah, and I think if I would have tried any earlier, I don't think I was mature enough. I was still going out drinking with my buddies, Thursday night, Friday night. When I worked at CBE, I mean, everybody worked hard, but everybody partied hard. And, it wasn't until my late 30s where I started settling down. I mean, there's no way I would have been able to do it in my 20s. I mean,
yeah.
It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we were out. Sunday, you recover. So, yeah, I look back at 39 was young. At least to me it was.
You started going down this route and answering this one, I think, a little bit yourself, but if there's one thing you could do over.
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I mean, there's early on when I would get frustrated with a customer, like maturity wise, I think if a customer say your customer owed me 90 days for 90 days, and I would get upset that they owed me, which obviously I should have been paid at that point. Didn't typically handle it the right way or the best way that I should have. I don't do bill collection anymore. That's not my forte. I don't have that. I don't yell. I'm not a yeller. I'm not that way. I just, would say to a customer, well, listen, we're going to stop. We're not going to support you until you're paid in full. And really not the best way to handle it. So I think a maturity level was not quite there. I would say I didn't really, when I talked earlier about how I did well and I grew and I didn't really struggle much, I also grew very quickly, and that was a struggle to kind of keep up. I approached this business differently than most people do. Most people, they get capital, they get investors, and then they go after customers. And that's great. That's a great way to do it, but it's a very stressful way to grow your business. I get the customers and then grow the business that way. So, we're staffed appropriately for the customers that we have. When we bring on more customers, then I bring on more staff, and I think there's a lot of companies out there that do it differently. They're what I call backwards, but I'm really the backwards way of doing it. But they get the money, they get the investors, they get the salespeople out there, and they grow the business that way. So I think I may have changed that approach a little bit, or maybe halfway through. Would have done that a little different too.
What's a myth about running an MSP that you'd like to bust?
Oh God, it's probably the same with everybody. It's not as fun as you think it is. You've had to have heard that, right? It's a lot of work. It's a cutthroat business. It is a cutthroat business. I mean, I have the closest competitor to me geographically always tries to undercut every bid that we put out, every bid. So we try to undercut them to the point where no one's making any money. It's very, very frustrating. I would say this, knowing how difficult it is and knowing how cutthroat it really is, I may have taken a different approach, or maybe even gone into a different line of work. It's that when I talk to Ashley all the time deals with it, and she's just like, this business is brutal. It's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I can imagine you've heard that before.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's always a different perspective on it because there's so many different aspects of business.
Yeah, and like, a good example is manufacturers. I use, actually, I won't use any for an example, but everything's cloud, they're going to the cloud and they're going to the zero touch technology where you just plug in the equipment, it automatically registers to the cloud. So keep in mind, we bring customers, clients to manufacturers, right? We have the relationship. I've been on phone calls with the manufacturer and the customer, and the manufacturer has said to the customer, you won't need VoDaVi if you go with this solution. So that's what we're dealing with now. And I've talked to other owners out there, other presidents out there, like VoDaVi, and we're all dealing with the same thing. And if you're reading between the lines, the manufacturers are trying to use the partners to get to the client and then just trying to push us out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I know that's something that I'm losing sleep over is where are we going with this? Where is this going to end up? Because the manufacturer that did that to me, needless to say, I don't push their product very much.
Yeah.
And so if you can imagine that's, a piece that's thrown in there that now we have to deal with, where I'm getting on the call and say, okay, now I got to remind you that you're not going to say to the customer that you don't need VoDaVi anymore.
Right.
So it's a tough business.
What's something with all that's going on? What is something that you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to getting the business to a place where I can kind of hand it over to my employees and let them run the business, let them reap the benefits of it. I don't have kids. I don't have anybody to give anything to, really. I'm probably going to outlive my brother, who's most likely I'll outlive my brother, so I'm not going to be able to give it to him. So I think that would be the icing on the cake, is to my loyal, Ashley's been with me forever. She's so loyal. She's so good at what she does, works hard. And, it'd be great to just say, okay, guys, I am retiring. I'll be around if you need me. Hey, if you guys have that networking issue that comes up, nobody can figure out, give me a call and I'll still jump in and help out. But I'm going to step away. You guys know what you're doing. You don't need me anymore, and run the business and get it to a point. And if you're ready, we'll sell the business off and we'll split proceeds.
Interesting.
Yeah. You probably haven't heard that one.
No, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But if you we spend more waking hours with our team than we do with our family or kids, even when you have them. So, we've got an amazing team, so I totally get that aspect. I think most people realize how important their version of an Ashley is. They're Ashley, and other key members on their team, and just want to know, how can we help them? How can we take care of them? Because we're not this, some people think all business owners are evil, or, they think certain larger businesses are. But, I've just never met an MSP that was worth anything, that was worth their salt, that didn't care deeply about their team.
If anything ever happened to Ashley, I don't really know. It would be tough. It would be tough. Yeah. They have 19 holidays. I give them 19 holidays. Rarely do they ever use their vacation days, because they do work hard, and I feel bad charging them a vacation day unless they take consecutive days. I always try to say, if it's Memorial Day weekend, take Friday off if you can, make it a long weekend. I think that might be an official holiday now. I'm not sure whether Ashley made like the Friday before Memorial Day and Labor Day a holiday. So I try to do the same thing. Is make sure that they have a good balance. And I know everyone says that, but I would challenge anybody out there to have a more balanced. My staff's got a pretty balanced life for sure. They work from home when they have to or when they want to. A lot of times they come in the office because they rather come in the office. I think it's very odd. When I hear people talk about people working remotely and how things need to change, companies need to change, and I always say to people, you don't understand. I mean, I have people that rather come in the office, and you can collaborate better when you're in the office than when you're working remotely. But yeah, I mean, they're my family. They're my family, so got to take care of them. Besides my 3 dogs and my cat.
There you go.
Yeah.
What's the one book you'd recommend that another owner read?
Engineering Your Startup, it's called.
Okay. Who's that by? Do you happen to know?
You know what? I got to go find it. I'd have to find it. I'll send it to you. I'll email it to you.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get that and leave that in the show notes. Engineering Your Startup. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good. It just really kind of goes through, what you would expect, but it gives you, this is how you raise capital if you're going to go that route. These are the spreadsheets that you should be starting out with just to track stuff, right? You don't need QuickBooks. You just start out with a spreadsheet, and as the book goes, it builds and it builds. And when you get, to the end, it's kind of where I am now. It's kind of guided me up to that point. So
nice. For folks that have listened, if they're interested, just love to learn from you, reach out, find out more, connect with you online, how should they find you?
They can email me.
Okay.
Yep. Chris.Friel at VoDaViTech.com.
Okay. Great. Any social networks you're on or your website that you'd recommend, or just email?
Email is good. You can hit Facebook, Chris Friel on Facebook. And, or you can use the VoDaVi website, VoDaViTechnologies.com. You can find me there too.
This has been amazing. Thank you for the gift today. And thank you for being on MSP Mindset, Chris.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.